Hello, everyone. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie The Adventures of Paddington 2. Enjoy the movie. An elderly couple of bears, who adore orange marmalade, are planning a trip to London. Suddenly they see a bear cub being carried by a turbulent river to a waterfall. Risking their lives, they rescued the cub. Years later, the Paddington they had rescued ended up in London instead. The bear lives with the Brown family and is friends with the whole neighborhood. The owner of the antique store, Mr. Grubera, found a box of old things of Madonna Kozlova and offered Paddington among them to choose a gift to his aunt on the centenary. The bear found a fold-out album about London. It would be a perfect gift for the bear, who all her life dreamed of going to this city. But Mr. Grouper upset Paddington. This album is a great value and costs too much for an ordinary bear. Paddington got a job as a janitor in a barbershop, but a customer mistook him for the barber himself and asked him to serve him. Grabbing a razor, Paddington immediately lost control of it and shaved off a strip of hair on the dozing man's head. After picking up the trimmings, the inept tried to glue them back on, in which he was helped by orange marmalade, but his cunning was immediately uncovered, and the returning barber fired the careless assistant. The family arrived at the amusement park in the evening, where their new neighbor, Phoenix Buchanan, was just performing on stage. He was once a famous actor, for today he advertises dog food. Phoenix chose Paddington to open the fair. The actor asked the bear to tell about his dream, and he told about Madame Kozlova's album, which he would like to give to his aunt. Phoenix was interested in the album and clarified where Paddington had seen it, and he told him everything. The bear cub would try to earn money for the album by washing windows. From his suitcase he took out a folding ladder and also a bucket. But filled with water, it became too heavy. Paddington lifted the bucket upstairs in his own body, but nothing good came of this venture. With some difficulties and unconventional approach to work, the bear cub still managed to do the task and washed all the windows on the street. Only the harmful Mr. Curry does not like this activity of the bear. Paddington labors every day washing himself, as a brush, any glass in the entire city. The coin bottle gradually fills up. One more day of work and Paddington can buy a present for his aunt. Suddenly he sees a thief breaking into Mr. Gruber's store. Paddington went after him, but when the alarm went off, the thief grabbed the album and escaped. The police officer caught the bear at the scene. Paddington chases the thief on horseback on a familiar mongrel wolf. Driving into the bushes, he accidentally moved to the swan. With his antics, he managed to shock the man and he fell off his bike. The swan also threw the rider off, but he was picked up again by a wolf. The thief pretended to give up, but suddenly threw a bomb under his feet and disappeared into the smoke. One bear was left standing in the middle of the street and he was immediately arrested, and all the neighbors learned about the crime. The bear was thrown into a car and taken to the station, and the thief turned out to be Phoenix Buchanan. He is happy that the police accused of the crime of another. The actor talks to mannequins and dreams of returning to the big stage by staging a mono performance. To get the necessary amount of money for it just helps the album. On each spread, the little lady gives clues that will lead him to the treasure. Then he'll finally stop eating dog food on camera. Paddington's trial has begun, and it's clear that the judge was the same man who got a fancy haircut from the bear. Mr. Gruber doesn't believe his friend could have robbed the store. But paw prints were found all over the building, as well as orange marmalade. Buchanan the scoundrel testifies he supposedly saw the bear that night, and he wasn't really chasing anyone. Just like that, for theft of property and grievous injury to his hair, Paddington got 10 years in prison. Upon entering his cell, Paddington asked the guard to read him a bedtime story, but he refused. The Browns, meanwhile, are busy looking for the real thief, and Phoenix infiltrated the historical museum and found the first clue, the letter D. Paddington was sent to work in the laundry. He scattered the striped uniforms in the washing machine and accidentally threw in a red sock, which made the gray uniforms pink, and no one liked it. It was suggested that he slam the mitt and have a good meal, suddenly for the last time. However, the food was absolutely disgusting, but to the cook nicknamed Kastet, no one would risk pointing that out. Gromulus sent the bear cub to deal with the matter, so he could atone for his lapse in form. Bear complained about the lumpy porridge, gave Kastet a baguette on the head, and smeared ketchup and mustard all over him. Kastet was about to make a bear pie out of the insolent man, but then a divine marmalade sandwich popped into his mouth. Finding out that Paddington could also cook it, the authority figure announced that from now on the bear was under his protection. Mr. Grouper is surprised that the thief stole the album, as there were much more valuable items around it. The Browns visited Madame Kozlova's great-granddaughter and asked her to tell him about her relative. She was the greatest circus performer of her time, especially she became famous for her aerial acrobatics, and thanks to this she became rich. The magician wanted to take away her wealth and cut the rope. Falling from a height, the circus girl crashed to death. However, after opening the safe, the scoundrel did not find any treasure, but only a fold-out album. To avoid being caught, the magician disappeared with the album and was never seen again. Mrs. Brown guessed that the album contained clues to the treasure. To get to St. Paul's, Phoenix disguised himself as a nun. Kastet wakes Paddington up in the middle of the night and sends him to the kitchen to make marmalade. The cook is not going to help Bear, so he has to handle 1,000 oranges on his own. Paddington keeps mentioning his Aunt Lucy. This makes Kastet angry, and he calls the bear an old bag. Paddington then turned on his famous stern look, which made the authority figure tense up. He himself often uses it. Praising the prisoner's hands, the bear suggested that they would make excellent juicers, and so engaged Kastet in making marmalade. During the night there was an incident in the cathedral. One nun went berserk and smashed a statue. Phoenix found the letter TS on it, and he smashed the statue to distract the guard. When reinforcements arrived, the bishop had already come out of the cathedral instead of the nun. For breakfast, Paddington presented a dish from the chef, marmalade between 2 pieces of bread without crust. All the convicts were absolutely delighted and greeted Kastet with applause. Bear suggested that the others should participate if they could cook, and it turned out that the prisoners knew a lot of recipes. Soon the kitchen was filled with culinary masterpieces, and the canteen was called Aunt Lucy's Tea Club. The prison blossomed, and the guard began to read stories to the prisoners. The Browns came to Paddington and told of their investigation. The bear cub introduced his family to his new friends. Minister Brown didn't like them at all. The man is lucky that the cons are not offensive. They would like to help in the investigation, but the portraits of the suspects are very strange. It's like a masquerade. Mr. Curry hinders the search by calling Paddington a thief. He's the only one happy to see Paddington locked up. Mrs. Brown jokingly asks the parrot where the thief is, and the bird says he's right behind you. Just behind her on the balcony came Phoenix. The actor bragged to his neighbor that he had probably found the money to finance his mono performance, and for some reason called the thief a blue-eyed beauty, although all the drawings were black and white. Mrs. Brown assumed that Phoenix was the one they were looking for, but now they had to figure out how to expose him. The prisoners communicate through pipes at night, and Kastet promises to help them find the real thief, but to do so they will have to escape from the prison. Mishka refuses, and the cons convince him that the Browns will soon forget about him. But they do everything they can to help him. Mrs. Brown hid in a huge basket that supposedly needs to be delivered to Phoenix, and the children came to his agent and recorded the conversation on a tape recorder. They used a recording of the woman's voice to lure Felix out of the house, and he ran towards the restaurant. Mrs. Brown got out of the basket. Her husband saw her from the window and also climbed into someone else's house. The spouses found out that the actor has a lot of debts. He is bankrupt. Then they found a secret entrance to the attic. In the attic, the Browns found costumes and the thief and the nun, which means that it is still Phoenix. The actor himself returned for a scarf and found a neighbor hiding behind a couch. Found Phoenix and Mrs. Brown. They lie that they are inspecting the neighbor's house, for Mr. Brown works as an insurance agent. Phoenix pretended to believe them and immediately checked to see if the album was in place. The actor had already collected all the letters, or rather notes, and now they would have to play them in a certain place. With all the evidence they came to the police, but without evidence the officer is not going to listen to them. For the first time ever, the family was late and didn't show up at Paddington's house for a date. Mishka thought he was beginning to be forgotten. At night, he dreamed that he was back in the jungle of Peru and met Aunt Lucy. Paddington agreed to take part in the escape. First they sneaked into the laundry room, then the bear got to the clock tower by means of gears. There was the office of the head of the guard with all the keys. The prisoners climbed out onto the roof, made a balloon out of the sheets of a large basket, and left the prison. The criminals changed into ordinary clothes and landed near the airfield. It turned out that the fugitives were not going to help the bear cub. They were leaving the country right now. Kastet had to lie, otherwise Paddington wouldn't have agreed to help them. The bear got upset and ran away. He left messages for the Browns that he had escaped from prison and said goodbye to them. Mrs. Brown immediately called back, and Bear found out that no one had forgotten about him, and moreover they found out who the real thief was. They agreed to meet at the train station, where the carnival train was leaving today. It was to him that the last clue led. Bear was helped by the garbage man from his street, and Brown was helped by all their neighbors who pushed the stalled car. They all want Paddington to come home. Bear ran through the train station pretending to be a trash can. Paddington recognized the actor and jumped on the train after him. The Browns were late, but they didn't give up. Jonathan understands steam locomotives and has stolen one. Meanwhile, the fugitives have heard on the radio that their furry friend has been seen at the train station and the police are about to capture him. He's probably underneath them right now. Turns out the killer magician was Phoenix's grandfather. The actor found a carnival organ and started pressing the right keys. Paddington uses caramel apples to move on the roofs of the carriages. At the same time, the families jumped from locomotive to train, and Mr. Brown had to remember what he learned in yoga class. Phoenix dialed the right combination and a treasure box opened up in front of him. However, the bear cub took the album and startled the thief. The organ slammed shut again and Phoenix didn't remember the combination. He chased Paddington until he went down. The family was about to grab him, but Phoenix armed himself with a sword and restrained everyone. However, Mrs. Beret also knows some tricks. Bear tries to reach the locomotive with a folding ladder, but the actor dragged him back down. He takes away the album and unhooks the wagon with the bear, but he himself gets a ball in the forehead from Mr. Brown. The wagon with the bear went under the slope and fell into the water. Mrs. Brown jumped from the bridge into the water and almost saved Paddington, but the door was closed on the chain. There seemed to be no way out of the situation, but the prison friends of the bear swam up to the carriage and broke the chain. Paddington was rescued, but he became ill and woke up at home 3 days later. The Browns told him he'd been acquitted and Phoenix had been thrown in jail. It's Aunt Lucy's birthday and Paddington hasn't given her a present. But there is nothing wrong with that. All the neighbors came to visit him and told him that they had all come together to give her a present. They brought Aunt Lucy here so that she could finally see London with her own eyes.